course, is we have a mandate for the business that it's bringing through both houses of Parliament. So, for example, there's not a manifesto commitment.
The research suggests from the Institute for Public Policy hung parliaments are more likely in the future, but that will be the case, it says, under both alternative vote system and first past the post, because the other parties are becoming more prominent.
Well, it hasn't been so. I mean, actually, that's not what history has shown us. And it's interesting, of course, that only in Australia have they got an AV system, and we can't compare ourselves with Australia, where voting is compulsory, and of course you have a state system which alters the whole nature of how voting takes place.
Right. Yes, but if you look at what's happened, back in the 50s, 90-odd% voted Labour or Tory. We were a two-party state, and this was a system designed for a two-party state. We're no longer a two-party state. The last election, 63%, 64% voted Labour or Tory. The rest voted for other parties, and that isn't reflected as yet in our electoral system, and needs to be if we believe that democracy is about reflecting how people vote.
But some of the biggest democracies in the world, you look at India, for example, or Canada, or America, use first-past-the-post system. If it's good enough for most democracies in the world, why not us?
Well, because I think you can look at what's happened in this country, and we have lost confidence in the political system. The public have lost confidence. All the polls show that overwhelmingly. And therefore, you've got to say, what are we going to change? Now, this is one change. It's not a massive change, but it's one change. And it's the first, I believe, of many that are needed to get the public back supporting our politicians and political systems.
It would mean that, for instance, Robert, voters would have more to think about. They'd be expressing more choice, and their vote would mean more, surely.
Superficially, that's true, but actually, Greg argues that people don't have confidence in politicians. You have to look at Australia to recognise that they don't have confidence in their politicians as they're elected by this system. I don't think that's the way to do it. The fact of the matter is what has happened is that this measure has been brought in to suit one political party, and that is fundamentally wrong. It's perfectly reasonable to consider changing the system of electing our MPs, but not for the convenience of one party in the way that's happened. It's been forced through Parliament very quickly, and I think quite wrongly in the way that it's been.
But it's not just, I mean, there are Labour MPs and other Green Party MPs are also
fine.
Green Party members supporting it.
In fact, but
well, every political party is in favour of this, except for the Conservative Party and the BNP.
Well, and the Labour
the party is in favour. Some of the MPs are not.
Well, actually, Labour is not in favour. In fact, it's pretty well split in the House of Lords. I'd say overwhelmingly, most members of the House of Lords in the Labour Party would vote against AV.
Well, people over a certain age tend to, and then the House of Lords is full of them.
Would you, under the alternative vote system, get an MP who has been more widely backed in the constituency that is there at the moment?
It would mean that you won because you got 50% of the support of the electorate, which a lot of MPs don't have now, compared to 20 or 30 years ago when they did.
Even if it's not first preference.
Yes, even if it's not first preference, it says it also means people can put as their first preference, instead of tactical voting, they can put the person they support.
Because, Robert, at the moment, the majority of MPs are there without the majority support in their constituencies.
Well, that's not true, but actually, first of all, tactical voting is always going to happen. And it will happen with this system. It'll just be a bit more complicated in how it happens. And I think it's interesting that even Nick Clegg, who's the biggest supporter of the system, argued from the very beginning that it was a miserable little compromise.
Well, he said, no, but he said that, to put that in context, he said Gordon Brown's proposal at the time was a miserable little compromise, which is something different to the general...
Well, that's the proposal that we'll be voting for tomorrow.
It is the case, isn't it, Greg, that you don't actually want alternative vote. You would like to see proportional representation.
Well, I think there are some people who want the alternative vote because they want to keep the link with the constituency part, with individual MP representing an individual constituency. That's a different debate. I personally happen to believe in some sort of proportional representation system will be better, but I think this is a first stage. But it's a first stage to not just changing the electoral system. We have got to change the way we do politics in this country.
That I wouldn't disagree with, but to have a system which risks getting what we've got at the moment, which is a compromised government, which is bringing in legislation on education, on health, on a whole range of issues which are not actually voted for by the electorate.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm really sorry. we have to leave it there.
And it has been a very well-behaved
and
debate.
civilised.
Yeah,
Thanks
civilised.
so much.
Thank you very much.
Because we're not politicians.
Ah, okay. Didn't get ugly at all. Thank you.
If you are still a little confused about the two systems and the referendum, you can find more on the BBC website. Go to bbc.co.uk/vote2011.
And of course,